Okay, we're live.
Yep, going forward now. Yep, going forward now.
Okay.
All right, so how are you, Peter?
Oh, this is the last super chat before Christmas, so I decided to wear a little holiday. Got
Very nice.
my reindeer here, bow tie, so a little bit of Christmas cheer.
Very nice. I like that. Yes, it's very nice. I mean, that's a sweater?
Well, it's a cardigan.
Sleeveless set. It's like, okay, so you call it a cardigan, not a sweater.
Or yeah, a vest, V-neck.
Right. Yeah, I normally would call that a sleeveless sweater, but I'm never exactly sure the difference between things like a sweater and a cardigan. So I don't know. I mean, do you know the difference between the two?
Let the observer decide.
Right. All right, so let's then start recording. A little early, but we can start recording. Yeah. So what's the weather like in Moscow? Cold?
Cold, but tolerably cold. Okay, it's one of the interesting things about the Russian winter is that as you go into the winter, you want it to never get any warmer than 3 degrees, -3. -3 is good because then when you go into 1, 2, 3, and it's sustained positive, it melts.
Yes.
So it's better just to freeze it and let it go for weeks on end.
Yes.
And most people don't know this if you don't live in a cold environment, but the colder it is, the less likely it is to snow. Okay? Because it's more moisture. And so when the continue, I mean, if you go into like -8, 9 Celsius, that's good too, because you're not going to get a whole lot of snow and it's not that cold. Now, when you go it's like 11, 12, 13, then it starts, that's cold. It's just cold.
So there's a temperature range when it starts snowing. So what's that temperature range for snow?
No, I mean, it can snow anywhere between, +10 all the way down to like -5. But the colder it gets and the more sustained it is, it's a perfect winter day is -5 degrees Celsius with blue skies.
Right.
That's when we wear sunglasses in winter because it's very, very bright. Okay?
Right. So but if let's start snowing at +10, then obviously it's snow that's just going to melt. I mean, that's not going to stay.
Yeah. I mean, it just comes down. Okay. Right. But I mean, there's different kinds of snow too. It can be snowflakes. It can be a very heavy, wet snow. Right.
I have to say, Peter, your cardigan is attracting a lot of attention. So people saying, Elvis Grr says, glad to see you festive, Peter. And then Gary Proctor says, Peter, it's a tank top. And
then, another one.
Yeah, Johnny Bunt says Peter the Red. So it's obviously you've done good. You're attracting a lot of attention. So
of course there'll be people who say I'm a communist because I wear red.
You're like AOC who wore that dress at that that fancy thing at the New York Public Library. What was it? Which attacks the rich. Written across her ass. I mean, that's.
I just don't have her ass. Okay.
No.
I mean, I've been called an ass, but I don't.
Right, exactly. No. That's right. Yeah. It is very funny though that when she did that, she really showed what she really was. I mean, she really wasn't a very serious person. I mean, I think she's a self-promoter. and she's going to end her career in politics. You know, she'll be there for a few more years, and then she'll go on maybe Hollywood, something in the media. You know, that's what she's really into. You know, she's not a really serious political person.
And she's not a power player at all. George and I have talked about this endlessly. This is really just a smoke and mirrors game that she's playing with Pelosi. I mean, like she's in opposition, and she caves every single time. She'll abstain when she knows a Republican is going to jump in and take her vote. I mean, she's very calculated. She's very cynical and very privileged. She's always been very privileged. I was a bartender. She came from the other side of the track, meaning the right side of the track, very well privileged, nicely educated. And she pulls this, this
whole bartender. Yeah, she worked in a fancy restaurant in New York. I mean, she worked on Union Square Cafe. That's a very fancy place. You know, a lot of hip, cool people go there. You know, they spend a lot of money for fairly crummy food. So, yeah, the way she said, "Well, I was a bartender," you think of some dive in Queens where she was, pulling these pints for people who could only afford $2 for a drink. No, I mean, she worked in a fancy place where a lot of aspiring actresses work as waitresses. That's where they make connections with Hollywood producers and actors and so on. So, it's her shtick. Oh, I was a bartender.
I mean, Cori Bush, which I think she's from St. Louis. I mean, I have nothing in common with her politics whatsoever. However, I will say something in her favor. She's probably the only person in all of Congress that has actually had to work for a living. Okay, she is, and when she does speak out, which I think sometimes it's a bit loony. But I mean, when she talks about how working people feel, I advise everyone to listen to what she has to say, because the elite media, the legacy media, they do, all they want to do is they want to talk about the stories that pull at your heartstrings. A really good example of this recently, like a kid in Nevada, he was raising money for his school friend that was, dying of cancer, and he go fund me, and they love these stories, but they never step back and say, well, why is a child dying of cancer in America? Why? The richest country in the world. Why is a child? See, everything is so warped, okay? And what Sandy Cortez does is she's just a show. She's just a gas bag show, okay? And the media loves it.
Right, but it's interesting that Obama himself is like that. It's clear Obama his ambitions were always to end up in Hollywood with movie people, with celebrities, with famous musicians and so on. I remember when he first emerged in 2007, 2008, serious people really thought, oh, this is a really, a real idealistic person. He's just, this is serious. He's not interested in money. He's not interested in celebrities. Now, he's more like Jimmy Carter. He's going to devote his post-presidency to doing good works. No, he's devoted his post-presidency to making a ton of money. Much as Bill Clinton did.
Yeah, well, what Barack Hussein Obama did, his whole aim, and he has achieved it, never break a sweat, never work a full day. Okay, he succeeded at it. And I mean, he could do a master class on that. Okay, never break a sweat and never work a full day.
Right. No, that was Bill Clinton did that. I mean, he was a masterful at. Remember when that time? It was about 20 years ago. There was a big thing about how he was going to open an office in Harlem. That was a huge thing. New York Times was writing, oh, he's opening an office in Harlem, it's going to, generate a lot of economic activity and so on. It lasted about 2 weeks. I don't think he ever showed up for work once during that time, but he managed to get a lot of publicity out of it. Oh, Bill Clinton opening his office in Harlem. So,
Instead, the Clinton orbit, they bought all this property in Brooklyn and pushed out everybody else and turned it into that's where Hillary Clinton had her headquarters in 2000. All her other snobby limousine liberals with drinking their lattes. Okay, exactly that. Okay, but a master class. I don't know if you missed it. not that it's noteworthy. It's more of, on the fringe. Bill Clinton is going to be giving.
Yes, but he's also giving a masterclass. Yes. Well, what's the masterclass on? I don't
no
know.
one knows. No, nobody can figure it out. It's just, what is it going to be? Creepiness, cringeness.
Right.
How to work on your marriage. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
He's got a lot of material to work with.
Right. But that's what always happens when these sort of celebrity politicians. Oh, they're teaching a course at the John F. Kennedy School of Government in Harvard. What does this course consist of? Just anecdotes. That's all. You show up. You don't do actually any preparation. It's like it's not like you're delivering lectures and you have to prepare the lectures beforehand. You just show up, tell a few anecdotes. Give them your views about Newt Gingrich or Donald Trump or whatever, and that's it. You go home, and that's your masterclass. Well, John F. Kennedy School of Government. This semester we've got Bill Clinton teaching a course, and it's. I mean, that's what it amounts to.
Plenty of stories. Have a girl under your desk and orders airstrikes on Syria. I mean, not everybody in the world gets to do that.
Right. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. No, that's right. Well, as we were discussing yesterday, we're obviously going to talk about it more tomorrow. The media have, of course, gone into their usual overdrive, dismissing Russia's draft agreements. The only response that I've seen from the Biden administration has come from Jake Sullivan, which was fairly non-committal. I mean, he talked to the Council on Foreign Relations and, dialogue. We've had dialogue before.
Everything's on the table.
Exactly. It was a very anodyne sort of comment. The problem is that when they talk about this dialogue, is that as far as the Russians are concerned, we've had this dialogue, and the problem is that you're not listening. We're talking and you're not listening, and we're tired of this. That's why we put forward actually agreements written down on paper, that we don't want any more dialogue, so that then you can turn around and say, tee-hee, you took our word for the fact that we won't expand into the East. More fool you, tee-hee. That's Russia. We're not interested in that sort of dialogue. So but that's what these senior officials were speaking off the record. So, well, yeah, we can have dialogue, but as for these draft agreements, non-starter.
Well, so where do we stand? So you want to call Putin's bluff? Go ahead. Go ahead. Right. The onus of responsibility is on you. If you want to do that, go ahead.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it was interesting. Again, we get this. Who knows what's going on in the Biden administration? Jen Psaki came out with kind of definitive language and all of that, which I never take her seriously, and she's just a conduit. I mean, and that's what her job is. Let's be fair. Okay, so with this non-plus stuff coming out from Sullivan, it tells me that they're thinking about a reply. I did read a report that at the end of, I guess, really on Christmas Eve or something like that, Thursday or right before Christmas Eve, they might come out with some kind of reaction. So of course, George and I will be covering it here up until Christmas Eve, and we're going to talk about it on Crosstalk tomorrow, which will be on air all day Monday. Okay, so that's where we stand.
So we have a super chat from Flying Boar. Thank you very much, Flying Boar. Very nice of you. It says, he's asking a question. Putin is very different than Obama or AOC. I would say so. What do you think, Peter?
Well, he's a statesman, okay? Right. Let me tell you, when our team, we moved into our new offices, I think it was 2010, 2011. We were in the center of the city. And so we moved out to the outskirts, and once our studio television complex was put into effect, really high tech. It's the most high tech television station in Russia right now, maybe even further afield. And so he came and paid a visit, and it was very interesting. I was in, I got to meet him twice during that visit, and I was waiting in my studio, and he came in. I think it was Gromov that was with him, is not a spokesperson, but assistant spokesperson, which I know. He's a very nice guy. And so Putin came in and looked around my studio. I shook his hand, and he kind of looked at me, and he kind of looked around, and he said, thank you, spasiba, and I said, spasiba vam, and you know, it was like 40 seconds, but I did have a one-on-one, okay, it's still technical, I have witnesses.
But it's very fun. No, all right. Yeah, no.
And then he was given a tour of the other studios, and we went into an empty studio that was set up for an interview, and I sat next to him for 90 minutes, and I watched him he was right next.
I remember watching that, and because all the people at RT got to ask him a question, and you asked him a question as well, and yeah, but I remember Oksana Boyko was there. She got to ask a question, and I
don't talk about other employees of RT.
Right, no, I understand that. No, but that was the one person that I remember. It was either to her or to someone else. He said something like, you know, so a few years ago, he said something like, "There's a danger of spending too many years as a foreign correspondent." He said something of that.
No comment. No comment.
All right. So yeah, no, but it's very funny.
Oh, I told the story. So is there a comparison? No, because questions were asked and they were very thoughtful answers. Answers weren't on cards. They weren't boilerplate replies. The usual nonsense. He actually pondered the question and gave us an answer. And I appreciated that. And he gave at least the appearance of being genuinely very interested in what we're doing. I mean, you know, the Kremlin, you know, put a lot of money into RT. I think he's just saying, you know, we're getting our money's worth here. I mean,
no, I think that was very much, yeah, that was very much the thrust of the meeting, which is entirely appropriate because after all, yeah, we're putting a lot of money into it, so we want to see whether we're getting a bang for the buck. But the funny thing is that you always watch his face at these ceremonial events, and he does a lot of ceremonial events, you know, meeting statesmen and making statements and then answering questions. He always looks kind of miserable. I mean, you know, he's just sitting there, always looking very gloomy, you know, sort of, you know, sunk down, and then he kind of gives his answer, and then he again looks gloomy.
I tend to disagree a little. I think he's more somber, and I think he's just thoughtful. I mean, he takes his job very, very seriously, and you know, I'd like to push back against the mainstream media, as we do. You know, they say he's clinging to power.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'd say that it's very difficult for him to leave. Okay, that's the problem. Okay,
right.
Because, I mean, if I was here, I remember like it was yesterday, George, when a very, very young man from St. Petersburg suddenly was president of the Russian Federation. I mean, and he was very young.
I know, he doesn't look like the person who, I mean, if you look at a picture of him, 1999, which isn't that long ago, it's only 22 years ago. I mean, it's just like a different person. I mean, it's like, you know, wow, I mean, boy, has he changed. Yeah.
And from what I understand, he has a very rigorous workout schedule.
Yeah.
I also have been told, I don't know if it's still true to this day, that he learned English during the time of his time in office. He can communicate. Of course, his first foreign language was German. And so, I mean, he saw the advantages of being able to, I mean, that goes back to my interview. I said, I'm going to ask my question in English. And I asked my question in English, and Margarita Samagnon, the editor-in-chief of RT, was sitting across from me. She jumped in and wanted to translate, and he said, no, I understand.
Oh, he did say that. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. I never know. I think Lavrov once said something like, "Oh, he understands English, though he doesn't like to speak it." I think Lavrov actually said that he understands English, but so yeah. Anyway, there's a follow-up from Flying Boar. Thank you so much, Flying Boar. Very kind of you. And he says, Obama is a very Hollywood type of a guy. But Putin doesn't like all that. Instead, he plays with firearms and AKs. I think that's right. I mean, he really enjoys outdoor activities. I mean, I think,
Outdoor
obviously we've all seen those photographs of him bare-chested, and, comedians in America love to have a lot of fun with that, and so on. But I think he does enjoy outdoor activities. And
I mean, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. He's very, very much into the environment, the preservation, and he's in the public eye, and his people are saying, "We need a Photoshop. We need a Photoshop." Come on.
I think it's that, and I think, obviously, hunting and shooting. There was also that time when he was it wrestled with a leopard? Was it? You remember that? That's dangerous activities when you start wrestling with leopards.
I mean, you can remember wrestling with some kind of wild animal or domesticated, I don't know. But then there are all the other pictures, which he likes judo very much, and he encourages very young people to go into judo. And I've seen him, clips of him. He's like doing a master class for 7-year-olds. I mean, and they're over the moon. Like, oh my God, I'm wrestling. I don't know. Do you judo? I don't know what the term is, but involved in this activity with Putin. And I mean, and it inspires so many young people, to be able to get involved.
Didn't he once have some,
the same thing?
Didn't he have some judo once with some girl, and the girl kind of threw him?
She flipped him, I think. Yeah.
She flipped him. Yeah, I remember. This young girl, a small girl. Not a big judo champion or anything. I mean, it was a small girl who kind of flipped him.
Anyway, she's still around, everyone.
And so anyway, the follow-up with Flying Boar. I don't know, Peter, to what extent you can answer this question. He says, what's going on with the RT German situation in Germany? Will Russia retaliate against Deutsche Welle News and YouTube? Do you know anything about that?
To be honest with you, everybody, I just have just the same kind of cursory knowledge that everyone else has out there. I haven't made any inquiries or anything. I mean, obviously, this isn't what was it called? Our operations in Germany is called a nuisance, so that needs to be taken care of. I mean, that we're not dealing with professional people here. I mean, it's extremely popular in Germany, apparently. Why are you afraid of that? Okay. Right. No, it's wrong thing. You think you can't have wrong thing. I mean, of all countries in the world, they'd be saying that media is a nuisance. I hear echoes. Okay, don't get me worried. Okay.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's right. It's if you're a Russian, it certainly raises your hackles whenever you get something like this from the Germans. Basically, Germans had better shut up. I mean, that basically, it's 75 years since the end of the war. Yeah, okay, but they just better shut up. I think that's often the view in Russia. Anyway, there's another super chat from our good friend Detroit Rock City. Nice to see you, Detroit. Thank you for the super chat. And he asks, what's happening to U.S. diplomacy and pragmatism? Well, we often talk about this and how there was the sort of pragmatic foreign policy that the United States pursued for decades, in fact, not even centuries, which had actually served the United States very well. They stayed out of wars, attended to their economic power. That's how they got to be the #1 economy in the world. Very, very prudent about international affairs. Woodrow Wilson ended that by getting involved in World War I. But even after that, there was a reaction set in America, said, let's go back to the old way that we used to do it, which is just stay out of wars. But even the echoes of that theme, after World War II, with the presidencies of Eisenhower, Nixon, which was very much, non-ideological. We pursue the American national interest. We're not going to rid the world of communism. We're not going to go on a crusade for democracy. That kind of ended. I mean, that's and so that's a very good question. What happened to that traditional pragmatic U.S. foreign policy?
Well, I think it's with the rise of neoliberalism as an ideology, and it's infected how the foreign policy blob sees American interests. I mean, neoliberalism is antithetical to American interests. I mean, the way I look at it, okay? I mean, again, I don't want to harp on it too much, but I mean, this whole democracy summit it's about preserving and extending the power of neoliberalism. It has nothing to do with democracy. You guys, only people inside the Beltway and in the legacy media believe this BS, okay? Right. Nobody else does, okay? Right. And it's just a scam. It's a cover for all the malicious and malevolent things that they do, okay? I mean, John Bolton, as creepy and cringeworthy as he is, when it came to Venezuelan oil, at least he said the truth, okay? I mean, our companies would like to get down there in that oil patch, okay? At least he said the truth.
Right. That's right. It is, but the problem with these American policymakers is that they always assume that these two things march hand in hand: American national interest and the democratic crusade. And so they never even think about, well, they're actually two quite different things. But yeah, the idea that we're crusading for democracy, always a bogus, always fraudulent. It was a big fraud in the Cold War, big fraud today, and it is to mask much more malevolent intent. I mean, the malevolent intent, I think, isn't just so much. If it was just a matter of oil, we can do that, but it isn't really about oil, because there's plenty of oil in the world. I mean, you don't need to go to war against anyone to get oil. I mean, you just you go into the market, you buy oil. But what it's really about is control of the world's resources, control of other countries' governments. That's what it's about. So it isn't anything as innocent as, we're just in it for the rare earth metals. If you want rare earth metals, you go buy rare earth metals.
I think you and I are the only two that say it on a regular basis. I mean, I go to, before, again, this pandemic nonsense and the lockdowns and all that, but I used to go to panels and stuff like that. And people say, going to war with Iraq for its oil. And I always interject, I wish it had been for oil, because that's something I can understand. Right. No, it was for ideological reasons.
Right, exactly.
Okay? Exactly. And that's what's really scary. Also, the continue with the first question about what happened in foreign policy is that everything is turned into a binary. Have you noticed how it's autocracy, democracy, justice, injustice, us versus them?
Yes.
And this is a binary. I mean, for public relations purposes, NATO does that, okay? Right. But I mean, it has nothing to do with the real world, okay? Exactly. Because international relations are not based on those ideas, and national interests are certainly not based on those ideas. I mean, look at Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, he was a real crafty fox, okay? But it was always America first. He was for America first president.
Right, that's right. And it's very interesting. I mean, Biden keeps rabbiting on about somehow, well, autocracies are winning. There are more autocracies now than there were 5 years ago and 10 years ago. He goes, cites, Freedom House. I mean, the idea that Freedom House is a reliable source. So, well, more, but, let's say it's true. Let's say that, this country we deem democratic is now authoritarian by the Freedom House measure. So what? What do you care? I mean, do you live in that country? I mean, are you planning on living, whether it's Hungary, or are you planning on living somewhere in the Middle East? No. So why should this be front and center of US foreign policy? And yet Biden and his acolytes, they keep repeating this. Oh my God, autocracies are on the march. This is somehow poses a challenge to the United States.
Well, of course, and it gets down to, again, I went through the hierarchy here: legitimacy and illegitimacy. And so, you throw in the lens of democracy, and that's how you determine what's legitimate, what's illegitimate. Look, folks, I'm going to sound like a complete heretic right now. Democracy is an experiment. It's relatively young in the world, okay? Is it the Fukuyama's, it's the, end of history and the last man? It's all nonsense, okay? I mean, nominally speaking, of course, people should have a say in their lives, okay? But that's about as far as you can go with it, okay? Then it gets more and more complicated, okay? And there are political traditions, and there are cultures, okay? And there are histories, and there's so much more you put into the mix. You just, and also, American hegemony is being challenged left, right, and center. And so let's wheel out democracy again, right. As if it's going to make any difference, okay?
Right. No, I think it's very good, because of course, democracy, yeah, it's been around for for centuries. I mean, the Greeks, the ancient Greeks talked about democracy, the rule by the people. But of course, the problem arose that, well, how do you define that? Because just having a general election, well, that doesn't make it a democracy. After all, in the United States, the founding fathers created a very complex system to ensure that majority rule didn't exist and that minority rule didn't exist. So they wanted, they put in all sorts of checks and balances in place to make sure that there wasn't majority rule, and also checks and balances to make sure that the minority wouldn't get to tyrannize over the majority. But that's the point, that it's very, very hard to define what is democracy, because if you're just looking at the American system, there are very many anti-democratic aspects to it, and some deliberately because of the founding fathers, and some because of the practice that has evolved over the years. I mean, I don't think the founding fathers intended the Supreme Court to just run the country. Why would 9 elderly people decide that they can just simply run the country and overturn the wishes of democratic legislatures? I mean, they didn't have that in mind, but that's what has happened in America.
Well, they had some extremely anti-democratic ideas in mind. It's called the U.S. Senate. Okay. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. I mean, all my lefty friends, we have to get rid of it. It's all undemocratic. Right. And I said, it's not democratic. I agree, but that was the intent.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was the intent to make sure that I'll use it in today's boundaries and states. I mean, to make sure that New York, New Jersey, Illinois, and California didn't run the country. Okay.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's right. And that's why when we have this, electoral college system, people say, oh, we don't want that. So why would it be good to have elections, which essentially would be, well, the only place we go and campaign would be New York City and Los Angeles, Dallas and Houston and Chicago, and we'd ignore the rest of the country. I mean, by having an electoral college system, you actually get to campaign in many different states, because you got to put together your electoral college majority. Otherwise, let's just stay in New York City.
Yeah, well, Democrats never complain about the electoral college when they win.
No, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. So there's a question here, a super chat from our good friend Ryan McDonald. Thank you so much, Ryan. Very kind of you. And he asks, very good question. With John McCain gone, which US politician is pulling the Ukraine strings, or which is the most hawkish against Russia? What do you think?
I think Lindsey Graham probably.
Lindsey Graham, yeah, I'm thinking about that. I think, among the Republicans, probably Lindsey Graham, maybe Ted Cruz as well. He seems pretty hawkish. But the Democrats have generally been more hawkish in recent years when it comes to Russia. So that guy, was it Menendez, the New Jersey guy? I think he's among
the crook, right?
The crook, exactly, the crook. In the Senate, yeah, Menendez. In the House, of course, Adam Schiff. It's and then. Yeah, I mean, I think those are probably the most hawkish on the topic of Ukraine and
Russia.
Something
that George and I have noticed that if you look at cable TV, which I to be honest with you, I watch a little bit of Fox. Okay, I mean Tucker Carlson primarily, but if you look at the other quote unquote primetime shows, they bring out the same 10 people, trot them out over and over and over again. Okay. Right. And they want to give the impression that this is at least the conservative consensus, which it's not. Okay. It's not at all. These people actually have minority views when you look at the population at large. But see, that's the disservice that Fox does. I mean, and CNN and MSNBC do the same egregious things. Okay. But you get these, they create a perception that is just not true. Okay.
No, I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that yeah, but Fox News never liked Donald Trump. I mean, it was never really their cup of tea. They kind of made peace with him once he won the Republican Party nomination in 2016. But the moment they sensed, wow, he's lost the 2020 election, boom, did they turn on him. And that includes, incidentally, Ingram. Ingram did not support Trump after the election, didn't really support him in challenging.
He was the first.
Yeah,
he was the first to step away.
Yeah,
he was
exactly.
the first.
The first, yeah.
Within a day, what is it, a day?
Within a day, it was something like, yeah, within the day, she was bombed. I'm not,
you don't have to be happy about it. It's something.
No, that's it. Yeah. It's so, but you're absolutely right. So, during the day, and again, like you, I don't watch Fox News during the day, but I think that, they're running Karl Rove. I think he's a frequent contributor there.
But he's never been right about anything.
Never. Makes a fantastic sum of money. It's an amazing thing that all this time since the runoffs in Georgia in January of this year, the consensus is, oh, it's all Trump's fault. It's all Trump's fault. But both of those campaigns, those Senate campaigns, were run by Karl Rove. And nobody said, well, it's Karl Rove's fault. I mean, he picked up, I don't know how many millions running those two Senate candidates, but never his fault.
He was being, don't quote me on this here, okay, but he's being paid $20,000 a day, I think.
Something like that. Just an extraordinary amount of money. I mean, people like that, they really are grifters. I mean, these political consultants, I mean, they just rip off their candidates. I mean, serves them right, these candidates, they're willing to pay this kind of money for essentially, losers like Karl Rove. But yeah, absolutely right. And he just walks away, he's still back as an expert on Fox News,
Whiteboard.
Yeah, whiteboard, what's your prediction? And so on. And I guess another one who I think would be a successor to John McCain is little Marco Rubio. I mean, he's another one who's
little Marco.
When
I first heard Marco Rubio, I thought that was a new color of a crayon.
Yeah, I remember in 2016. I think it was the I think it was the Iowa caucuses where he did, I think, reasonably well. I think he came in third. And then he came on, and it's like and to say that I will be the next president of the United States, and it looked like a little boy wearing shorts. I mean, I will be the next president of the United States, really? But that's what he looked like.
Yeah, well, he was only outdone by Pete Buttigieg 4 years later. Look at the political class we have. Look at these people.
Yes.
Look at these people.
Yeah.
God, I mean, when you look at the Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, JFK, even into Nixon. Okay, I mean, there were a lot of people with gravitas in those days. A lot of people. I mean, read The Best and the Brightest by
David Halberstam.
It's a very, very, and he's a good writer, okay, and is a good writer, okay. But it's fascinating people, and then it's so vacuous. I mean, we have the Lincoln Project. Oh my God, what happened?
Yes. Yeah. No, that's right. It is very, very interesting. I mean, that how do people apparently young, inexperienced, they haven't really done anything, and then they're suddenly elevated into these positions. There's Marco Rubio, senator from Florida. And you have to say, well, there are powerful interests that support them and say, this is our guy. I mean, same with Barack Obama. Where did he come from? Suddenly, he's our guy, and all the big money is behind them, because there's no reason why would Marco Rubio in 2016 already be running for president. Like who he? I mean, and he's already. And if you remember, there were a lot of people, the pundits, who were right behind Rubio. Rubio. He was thought to be the front runner for that nomination. Until, of course, when Chris Christie just delivered a knockout blow. That's it. But so there was boom. Here's the consensus candidate, Marco Rubio, good interventionist, neoliberal. He's the person that we need to get behind.
Yeah, well, look what they did with Beto. Beto O'Rourke, okay?
That's right.
I mean, cover of Vanity magazine. Oh my God. Okay. See, what's happened here is that you could look at Stacey Abrams as well. Is what they do is they're not politicians. They sell them as celebrities. Okay, and they sell them as human interest stories.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And then they fetishize like Hispanics, okay, is all the same and all of that. And they constantly, and they get a cold awakening sometimes, because you look at some of the polling right now, is like Hispanics are 50-50. What happened? Okay. Right. And then, Latinx. It was some white liberal that invented that.
That's right. Yeah. You got
because they've turned Hispanics into a fetish for them. They're a fetish. They're not real. They're not people.
Exactly. No,
like they did to African Americans. They're turned into a fetish for white liberals.
Exactly. I mean, even the very term African American. I mean, blacks do not refer to themselves as African Americans. They refer to themselves as blacks. I mean, but that's again, African American, and so it's entirely only white liberals ever use that expression. But you're right. I mean, it is fascinating how they assumed that the Hispanics. Oh yeah, we've got them as a nice block. Always solidly behind us, but they, it should have been obvious to anyone is they don't want open borders. I mean, they, how is that, in their interest to have a constant source of cheap labor just
they won the lottery. They don't want to share it.
No, exactly. I mean,
Well, who would?
Yeah. That's right. So they think, oh, great, we'll promise them open borders and they're going to vote for us. And so, no, I don't think so. So, but, it's
well, I mean, historically, look at the Italian immigration, look at the Polish immigration. They were saying, shut the gate, okay? There's enough of us here.
Yeah. That's right. Yes.
Check the record. It's true, okay?
It is true. Because if you remember, it was, in the 1920s, the early 1920s, when America imposed the strictest immigration laws in its history. Boom, that's it. We're not bringing anybody in. Nobody could get in. I mean, that was from the 1920s through to the 1960s, the 1965 Immigration Act. Nobody could get in.
And you get it from The Godfather. Look at those films very carefully. It's like you had to smuggle the uncle in from Sicily, okay? Clandestinely. He just didn't get on the plane, drop off at JFK. No way. They smuggle people in.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like a zero tolerance. The gate is closed, it's locked, and the key is lost.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You have to smuggle people in. That's right. And it's not just a couple, but a number of movies with that theme of smuggling people in, because it was just impossible to get in. And there were deportations. I mean, because a number of, particularly the Italians, the ones who were linked with organized crime, they were deported. I mean, all those people, Lucky Luciano. I mean, they ended up in Italy. So it's that was also quite strict in those days about deportations.
Yeah, and I'm so glad we talk about this, because again, the media makes it sound like we've always had open port. It's always. And then Ellis Island, and Ellis Island is only one point of entry. There's so many other ones that, but Ellis Island is iconic here. 1/3 of the people that showed up were sent back, George.
Yes. Yeah.
They put an X on their back. They literally put an X on the back. You go back. You got tuberculosis. Okay. Yes. Go home.
Exactly. No, and that's a deliberate distortion of American history. They say, somehow America's always just had this open door. Anyone can just come in. No, it was extremely strict. And then, as I say, I mean, they specifically passed legislation not to let anyone in. I mean, that was it. No one could get in.
And the Statue of Liberty, it's the origins of the idea have nothing to do with immigration. And the plaque that was put at the lady's foot was put in years later, okay? And they reinvented the meaning of the Statue of Liberty. It's a complete historical fraud.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. It was reinvented, and then the journalists embraced it and just said, "Oh, that's it. This is this is what America's always been about." Apparently, people just come in from anywhere, and America always, has this welcoming arm. Here's a hot bowl of soup, and come in. We'll give you a nice job and a nice housing and whatnot. No, it's never been the American way. So reckless abandon says, look at the Nazi Ukrainian immigration. That's a very interesting issue, because of course a lot of the Ukrainians who had fought on the Nazi side in World War II ended up in Canada. Well, many ended up in Canada, but also some in the United States. It was a fascinating how this, I guess it was a kind of a pipeline by the West, just facilitated the exit of so many who had collaborated with the Nazis.
Yep, and it was kept under wraps for the longest time. And then all of a sudden, all in the 1970s and the 80s and the 90s, there are Nazi war criminals in America and Canada. How did they get there, everybody? They were brought there.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. That's right. And
see, all of these things are taken totally out of context.
Okay.
Yeah. What happened was the Cold War was upon us. These people might come in handy. Okay. I mean, they obviously have no morals. They'll do what we tell them to do.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. And they were rabidly anti-communist, and so they were very, very useful. Or so they created all these movements, like the captive nations movements, which were embraced by every American president, but they were all run by people who had been shipped out because they fought on the Nazi side. But they'd get nice chunk of change, so they'd run these newspapers, have these meetings and so on, and everyone was happy. Presidents would shake hands with them. No one cared what you're doing in World War II.
George and I are going to go down memory lane right now. Remember the publication Problems with Communism?
Yes. That's right.
Yeah. Nice little hive for people like that. Okay.
Yes. I mean,
I'm glad you brought up the captive nations concept. And this was a Cold War phenomenon it was focused on the captured nations of Eastern Europe under Soviet rule. But they forgot one country. Russia was the ultimate captive nation, and they would never admit that. Okay.
Right. Yeah. The problems, of course, the most serious problem, of course, arose with Radio Free Europe, because a lot of them worked in Radio Free Europe, and that would have been okay. No one really knew much about that until Hungary in 1956, because then the serious question arose: did Radio Free Europe encourage the Hungarians to rise up? I think they contributed to it. I mean, I don't think that it wholly explains what happened in 1956, but it's clear that this was a US government-run radio station, and they had no business broadcasting to Hungary, urging them to rise up and suggesting that the United States was going to come in on their side. I mean, to what extent Hungarians really believe this doesn't matter. I mean, they got very worked up in 1956, and nothing was going to stop them. They weren't using their heads, but basically, Radio Free Europe had played, a very negative role in 1956.
Yeah, actually, I've been published by Radio Free Europe a long time ago. As a matter of fact, you remember the daily briefings that used to come out for every single country? And
right. Yes.
Yeah, I'm really scratching the webs here.
Right.
But you would have these daily briefings for every single country.
Right.
And when I was an undergrad and graduate student, I was taking classes at Berkeley, and they would come in, and everybody, we all, I couldn't understand all the languages of Eastern Europe, so I referred to them.
Right.
And I'm going to not mention names here because I'm not interested in a pissing match with anyone. But I I recognized the names, and there was a certain point in time after I moved here, I started getting in contact with them, and it was like, oh wow, I remember that. And it was all kind of nice and fine. And then they'd say, oh hey, why don't you write an article? And I did write an article about historical memory, and these are, oh, this is not the kind of thing that we like to publish.
Right. Yes. Yes.
It was very inconvenient, and I just told them, I said, the interesting thing is the way we went in different directions is that, and I got them to admit that you can't question my anti-communism, okay? And they said, that's true. We know enough about you, known you long enough that you're certainly not touting that, okay?
Right.
And then some of the other things, transitions online, which was a offshoot.
Right, that was I think later. The transitions online. Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, with the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was funded by the CIA, they actually published very good magazines. I mean, Encounter was actually one of the best magazines in the English-speaking world. I mean, it was, very cultural, literary, political magazine. I mean, and it had big names writing with, T.S. Eliot would be writing for it, Gunter Grass, anyone who has a certain intellectual prestige would be writing in Encounter. And the other thing was that nobody really asked the question, I mean, where's the money coming from? They kept it very vague until it was exposed in the 1960s. And the same with Survey, which was published by, was Walter Lacour and Leo Labetz were the editors. And, again, no one really asked. Again, very good magazines.
What was the organization that did religious liberty? Kensington House?
Yeah, something like the Kennington Institute, something like that. I know what you mean. It's like that institute. Yeah, that's right, about the religious persecution in the communist world. Yeah,
I think people get to think we're really old, George. So we.
Well, this was for the height of. I mean, yes, obviously, but it is a part of history because, of course, it was exposed in the 1960s. There were some articles that were published in Ramparts, which was then edited by David Horowitz, who was still then he was still a leftist. It was David Horowitz, and then Tom Braden, who had been a very big shot in the CIA. He actually already ran all these magazines and so on, and he just blurted this out in a newspaper article. Something like, yes, I'm proud that the CIA is immoral because we did all these great things. So it was all very, very embarrassing when it came out. And then the Ford Foundation took it over and said, okay, well, all right, we won't have it financed by the CIA anymore. It'll be the Ford Foundation, because at that time, the Ford Foundation was run by Mac Bundy. Mac Bundy had left the Johnson administration and was now become president of the Ford Foundation. It's amazing how the establishment, moves.
Then the National Endowment for Democracy, which when
that's where they
privatized it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that's right. So I mean, it was, but it was just interesting how I mean, in terms of cultural contribution, I don't think there's been a magazine as of the quality of Encounter and Survey. I mean, it was they were really good. It's sort of here, the CIA. I mean, it did a lot of bad things. But it also produced some pretty good magazines.
Well, I remember the last edition of Problems with Communism, and the author's, the editor's introduction is, this is the last edition of Problems with Communism, because there's no more communism to talk about problems.
Yes.
It's really quite fun.
Yeah. So we have Jonathan, super chat from him saying, Liz Truss, the UK Foreign Secretary. So remember that name, Liz Truss, the UK.
Let me write it down. Okay.
Yeah, okay, Liz Truss. Okay, she's posing in that tank in Estonia is reminiscent of Michael Dukakis circa 1988. So again, for younger viewers, Michael Dukakis was the Democratic nominee in 1988 and seemed at one stage to be heading for victory, because remember, 1988 was after 2 terms of Ronald Reagan, so the Republicans had been there now 2 terms. Usually after 2 terms, there's a switch to the other party. And in 1986, the Democrats had won big. They recaptured the Senate. So it looked like the Democrats were heading towards victory. And then Dukakis did this. He opposed because the Republicans attacked him for being weak and soft and that's right, liberal. I think George H.W. Bush had said he's a card-carrying member of the ACLU, and so he wanted to show himself to be a tough on defense. He was not going to take any nonsense, and so he got into this tank and he wore this this sort of a helmet type thing, and he looked ridiculous, and unfortunately his campaign never really recovered from that, even though we had the Quayle Lloyd Benson debate, in which Lloyd Benson just delivered a kind of a knockout blow to Dan Quayle. Even that didn't really rescue the Dukakis.
You ain't no JFK.
That's right. It was a terrible knockout blow, and particularly it was terrible because Quayle in the debate prep, they were already prepping, this question. They knew this question would come up, that you are very young. Therefore, you're only 41. You'll be too young to be, don't you think you're too young to be president? And every time, Quayle would come up with that response. Yeah, but what about JFK? JFK was 43. He said, don't do it. Don't bring up JFK. You're opening yourself up to an attack. And still, Quayle brought up JFK.
Yeah, but see, then you go back to the political genius of Ronald Reagan when he was running against Mondale, and the age question came up, and Reagan did one of his. I will never allow the youthfulness of my opponent to become an issue in this election. It was just like one of his amazing.
It was, because again, that was it had been a serious issue, because what had happened is that they'd had one debate, Reagan and Mondale, and Reagan did just terribly. Absolutely embarrassing. It was like, it was a long, Biden performance, rambling. He seemed very ill-informed. And Reagan, who seemed to be coasting towards a comfortable victory, suddenly his poll numbers, changed after that debate. So they knew that, well, hey, suddenly your age is going to become a big issue here. And then they, he came up with that line, and that's it. He ended the whole age issue with that response.
But with the having what's her name?
Liz Truss, who as we've heard now reference posing in that tank in Estonia. So that was it. And again, I guess
it was a really threatening picture.
Yeah, it's very strange why politicians would try to present themselves in this kind of, in this military light. I mean, Poroshenko did that thing. I mean, he would walk around in these military fatigues, looked like an idiot. I mean, because he looked kind of pudgy, and basically looked like a pudgy man wearing pajamas. I mean, that he just didn't look terribly military.
And the juxtaposition, of course, is Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister of Russia. That's the real thing, folks. That's the real deal. Right. Okay, it's not a fake uniform. Right. It's a real uniform. Okay, right. A real military officer, and he is so admired in Russia. I mean, and he, it was, I don't remember what year it was. It was a few years back. It was, again, I was going to say at the height of tensions, but we always have the height of tensions. And it was on the May Day Victory Day parade, and the defense minister leads the parade. On the podium. You have the government officials, but it's his gig, and as he was coming in the gate, he stopped his limo and he crossed himself, which of course drove the liberals mad. They went crazy. Okay.
Right. So we have a question from Herman Montoya. I mean, he's a good friend of ours, so thank you. And he asks, when are you going to have Robert Kennedy Jr. on? He has the best-selling book called The Real Anthony Fauci. Now, I would love to have him on. I don't know how easy it is to do it, but this book on Anthony.
Just let me say this: I have the power to look into.
Okay, excellent. But this book, The Real Anthony Fauci, from everything I've read about and heard about it, this seems a pretty formidable book, because Kennedy had known a lot about Fauci. I mean, most of us had never heard of Fauci until this whole thing started, but he knew all about Fauci. back when he was the AIDS czar, he was the handling AIDS and recommending awful treatment that actually made everyone much worse, like AZT and so on. And then, Fauci was this very, very powerful bureaucrat. I mean, one of the most powerful bureaucrats in the United States. So, he had this avuncular air about him, but, scientists, science departments, universities were terrified that Fauci might just cut off the spigot. And, that's a huge thing. I mean, talking millions of dollars he could do. And so, he was this, essentially this tyrant. And a liar. He's been lying about his own involvement with gain of function research. So this book, I think, sounds really interesting, and it would be definitely good to have Robert Kennedy Jr. on.
It's interesting when you look at who was the creepy porn lawyer?
Avenatti, Michael Avenatti.
Yeah, Avenatti. Then you look at the Cuomo brothers, and you see these people that are so celebrated. And then the mask drops and you see who they are. And I would, if I were Fauci, I would be really careful because, you get, you're stimulating inquiring minds, okay? And this guy is not, he's a lot less a scientist than he is just a bag man, okay? Yes. That's what he is. I mean, when we had, what was the name of the advisor that was on Trump's team, and he was vilified all the time. He was on Tucker. He was on Tucker Carlson.
Is it this Cash? Is it Cash Patel?
Cash Patel. We'll talk about him later. He's an interesting guy. Think about who was the doctor that was on there, and
is it Scott Atlas?
There you go, Scott Atlas. And he says, and I have no reason to disbelieve him, is that he said that even Fauci couldn't even pronounce some of these terms. I mean, he's a lot less of a doctor and a physician than he is just a bureaucratic bag man.
Right. That's right.
Patel is a really interesting guy. I just wish he wouldn't give the deer in the headlights look all the time, okay? But he's a really smart guy. And we're going to hear a lot more from him. A lot more. That guy is on the way up.
Yes. But I think that, I think Fauci has been extremely deceitful. He deceived the Trump administration. He never let on what he knew. So he kind of, when one of the scientists sort of sent that email thinking, I think this is a artificial virus, he moved. He got everybody on this collective phone call and basically put out the order. You are all to say this is not artificial. This is a naturally occurring virus. He had no business, to make any statement as categorical as that, unless he already knew that, hey, this is a serious business, because he knew about the Wuhan Institute. He knew about how much money he had been essentially pouring into the Wuhan, and he wanted to stop this story, and he had the power to do so.
Why did he have the power to do it? Because he had the media at his back. Okay, he knew it. He knew that they would back him up, because he would. And if you look at those press conferences, he was always pinpricking in that little professorial way, Trump. Okay, I mean, again, Trump is, for a guy that became famous in the public eye because of The Apprentice. Trump, what he should have done is at that point in time, he didn't need to fire Fauci, but he should have created three scientists that you guys are now hooked together at the hip. You never talk to anyone unless all three of you, and the most boring physician scientists you could ever imagine, and just answer science questions. Don't go into politics, okay? Don't go into policy. And Trump let him in the door.
Yes. Yeah. No. That's right. And he had whatever else you can say about Peter Navarro. Navarro was obviously telling Trump, don't listen to Fauci. I think this guy is bad news. But instead, Trump listened to Fauci, and I think that it is a problem with. I mean, I think when it comes to his business, his real estate and whatever, Trump is very good at going with his instincts, and so I think he hires the people that he's comfortable with. I think he was very insecure about politics, and I think he decided not to go with his instincts, and I think that's what often led him to disaster.
I'd tweak that a little bit. I think he's very comfortable with politics. He's not comfortable with policy. That's the problem. Okay. Yeah, you see what I get at, because I think the longer the period is, the more Trump was actually right.
Right. No, I think that's right. But that's why would he hire somebody like McMaster? Why would he hire somebody like Jim Mattis? And you think, well, ultimately, I think he was intimidated. I think they came to him and he was, and he just, so that's why I think he didn't have didn't follow his instincts. And look at all of the terrible people that he hired. I mean, here that's the very top, McMaster and Mattis. But if you go down to at a much lower level, just people within his own White House staff, like Elisa Farah. What was she? She was just a pretty girl, but he made her, his communications chief. How can you make something like that the communications chief? And of course, she stabbed him in the back. I mean, that was immediate. Or that I forgot the name, the one who
Omarosa, or what was it?
Omarosa, that's another one. Was an embarrassment. But there was also the one that Jennifer something or other, who worked for him, and then she worked for his wife. She headed his wife's team. She worked for his wife, and then she came back to work again in his communication. So all of these were, they're just good-looking women. And you think, again, look, you're a businessman, and you should know, hey, well, there's a place for good-looking women in your organization, but you don't want to give big and important jobs to people whose only qualification is that they're good-looking women.
And apparently he only lost by 40,000 votes.
I know, that's exactly.
That's so weird when you think of it.
I know. After all that, they still.
I mean, after all the bad decisions, the 24/7, wall-to-wall, ceiling-to-floor hatred towards him in the media, and he lost technically, apparently.
40,000. Yeah. That's what it was. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, we have another super chat from Flying Boar. Thank you so much, Flying. Very, very kind of you. And it says, what does Putin and the Russians think of Fauci? I don't know that have they expressed any views on Fauci, but certainly the Russians have followed the consensus on the virus. I mean, they haven't in any way bucked the trend. So although the media in the United States are continually suggesting that all the anti-vaccine propaganda in the world is being generated from Moscow, there's no evidence for that. I mean, that they
certainly not internally, certainly not. No. I mean,
and then go.
No, I'm just saying all of the organs of public communication. I mean, you can't get away from, it's suggestive, please wear your mask, please wear your gloves and all of that. But the difference between Russia and the United States is there's no coercion, at least not yet. Now, there are rumors that are floating around that after the holidays, that they might go back to this QR thing code. I don't know what that's going to be. And the rumor is that, and the reason why people pay attention to it is that you'll need the QR code, to travel on public transportation. Now, you don't have to go to cafes. You don't have to go to restaurants. Okay, you don't even have to go to shopping malls. You can do everything online. But moving around the city, that's a different question. But it's still undecided. From what I can tell, there's nothing definitive about it. But to date, there's no coercion. During what I call the hard lockdown, if you were walking around without a mask, you were stopped. Okay.
Right.
But that was like 5 or 6 weeks maximum. And then when things started opening up again, they were constantly telling you, wear your mask, wear your gloves. But if you didn't, there was no consequence.
Right.
So it's kind of that way. I mean,
what do you mean there was no consequence? You mean you weren't fined? They didn't hit the
not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of, no.
Well, because elsewhere, they hit you with a huge fine. It's bad enough when the cop stops you, and but if you got a fine, you got a fine. Those are big fines. So maybe
it happened, but I'm not aware of it. Okay, and I'm a pretty. I mean, I like being in my own place, but I get cabin fever. So, I mean, I'll go into town to have lunch or something like that.
Right, right.
I wear a mask all the time, mostly because I'm a germaphobe, predating all of this. Okay. So, yeah, that's just the way I am. Okay. That's how people are. But, you know, the same kind of discursive debate is here as it is in the West. It's because when I keep hearing new cases, I don't care about the number. I don't care about that. That's the white noise that really irritates me, is that hospitalizations and deaths, okay? Those are the two things, that's the metric that you need to look at. I mean, the more you test, the more positives are going to be. Come on, think about it, everybody.
Right. Well, here's a follow-up question from Flying Boar. So again, thank you so much, Flying. Why is the Russian COVID situation so bad? They've got Sputnik 5. So is the Russian situation bad?
Well, again, like I just said, I mean, if you're going to go, if your metric is positive cases, then I guess it's bad. But from what I can tell, the number, the hospitalizations and deaths are dramatically down, and then the people that do die are like 78.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, no, I think that's the point. I mean, it is as you say that you know, these numbers. You say, oh, we have a number of COVID cases. Well, that means those are the numbers of people who are testing positive. But if you're not hospitalized and you're not dying, then what does it mean? I mean, you know, maybe at worst, you're at home with a cold, you're in bed with a cold. Okay, well, you know, we're all used to that. You know, it's you're used every winter, you expect to spend a few days in bed with a cold. Or maybe, you know, you're not even exhibiting any symptoms at all. You just tested positive for COVID. So, you know, they keep doing these numbers, you know, well, new cases, but, you know, without an explanation of what it means. It's just simply, you know, these are very big numbers, but, you know, it doesn't mean all that much.
And also another replication is that, and you and I have talked about this privately, is that it's just, for some people, it's just a cult. It's just, you know, it's their own personal melodrama. I was telling George, I'll just tell it real quick again, is that I went I was buying a metro ticket, and usually people that work, that's the cashiers. I mean, these are working people, they're blue collar people, probably not particularly well educated. And, you know, because of my phone, I have to give eye contact to pay for something. And so I dropped my mask so I could pay for it. She said, put up your mask. And I was telling George that it's like probably the first time in this young woman's life that she ever got to tell anybody what to do. And she liked it. She liked it.
No, there's an awful lot of that. There's which is the whole COVID hysteria has given power to the most obnoxious people. First of all, the snitches. You never want to create any sort of a system which encourages snitching. But, you know, as in your case, when somebody sort of bellows at you and, you know, you gotta go do this. I mean, I've had the experience as well. You know, somebody starts, you know, why aren't you wearing your mask? And it's extremely annoying, but, you know, it's empowered, you know, the worst types of humanity.
Yeah, but and it makes you feel powerful, and you think you're doing it for virtuous reasons. So it's really, you know, and you know, of course, I pulled my mask back up, but I mean, it's like, okay, lady, I mean, it's important to you. Okay, fine. Okay, right. And give me back my ticket. Okay.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And so, anyway, we have a different subject. We have another super chat from our good friend Spectre in the Air. Thanks very much, Spectre. Nice to see you. I guess you didn't go on a run today with your daughter. You know, usually Spectre goes on a run with his daughter, and then after the run, he joins us, and is always very generous. So anyway, so it says, "Hi guys, Trump listened to the wrong establishment types," and then Jared, you know, is way too gullible. Yeah, I mean, I think this is what we were saying. He was, I think, intimidated by these establishment types. There's also the problem that, you know, he probably really wasn't expecting to win. And so he never really built up the kind of a team that he, you know, needed to put in place, you know, the kind of, say, I don't know, a kind of a kitchen cabinet of people who were going to be around him and would be there as to you know, expressed skepticism about the kind of nonsense that all the Mattises and McMasters were likely to spout. So he really needed those sorts of people there. I mean, like if you think of Nixon, I mean, Nixon knew that when he became president, you know, he would have the whole political establishment against him. I mean, there were all these people who all been there since FDR, you know, they'd been there since Kennedy and Johnson. They were going to resist Nixon. So that's why, you know, he put in place you know, a team of people who would essentially be able to, you know, ensure that what he said was implemented, you know, with Haldeman and Ehrlichman, but also, you know, people like Pat Buchanan. So, you know, he needed his own people in place. Trump really didn't have any of that. So, you know, he didn't have any kind of a team in place. And so I think he was very vulnerable to these establishment types.
What makes it even worse is that Nixon knew all of his enemies. He knew how much they disagreed with them. He knew where they worked. He knew their careers. I mean, he knew exactly what was going to be thrown at him, and he knew how to create firewalls. Okay, Trump had none of it.
None at all. And I think that's you know, why he was led astray. But I think also, and you know, and here I think one can fault him. You know, you never want to practice nepotism. You never, you know, don't give your daughter a job. Don't give your son-in-law a job. I mean, that always ends badly. It pisses off everyone else on the staff, and they're going to give you bad advice. So that was that, and that's on him for giving them
well, you know, it's
jobs.
I'm glad you said it, George, because you and I call balls and strikes here. I mean, we could go on, and George and I will at one point in time about the Hunter Biden and the new the book Laptop
from Hell. Yeah,
we're going to do a separate video on that.
Yep.
But you know, to be fair, and I want to be fair, is that, you know, Jared, it looks like he was doing a lot of private equity stuff inside the White House. Okay, because I mean, as soon as they were out, I mean, he just boom, he's, you know, he got a ton of stuff on his plate. Okay, Mnuchin also, you know, another creep. You know, he was right out the door, and he was making money, and it looks like he was using his office as influence peddling. So, you know, the rot is everywhere.
Yes, no, that's absolutely, and I think we see this in the case of, I mean, you mentioned that the Biden family. And you know, because that entire family was basically making money through their connection to Biden. I mean, they had no independent source of wealth, no independent reputation of their own, other than they were related to Biden, and Biden has been a powerful figure in Washington for decades. So that was it. So, you know, the 10% for the big guy is perfectly understandable. He said, hey, you know, you're making money off my name. You know, you pass on the 10% to me. It's not a bad deal. I think it's very reasonable to ask only for 10%.
Well, the sad thing is one of the reasons why it's not. I mean, there'll be certain Fox News personalities that'll go after it, but the Republican Party, the establishment, is not going to go after this at all. I mean, they you know, they'll probably focus on, you know, Hunter Biden's health and addiction issues. Not the fact that he's a crook, okay? Because they're crooks. They all are, okay? And that's why it's never going to make any headway. I remember when it was first coming out, the lurid pictures and how they, you know, would pixel and everything. And I remember telling you, George, I'm not interested in that stuff at all, okay?
I think it's right. But of course, there's the rest of the family, because of course, you know, it wasn't just Hunter, but, you know, his brother, his daughter, and I think he has two brothers. So I think they all were doing very nicely of Biden. There's also the other question, and this was raised in a kind of a long, pointless article in the New York Times this week about the daughter's diary, which now seems to be confirmed that document was the daughter's diary. Now, of course, the New York Times made a whole big song and dance about it, suggesting it was stolen and so on. No evidence it was stolen, or that in some ways O'Keefe was the head of this this group. What's the name of this O'Keefe's organization?
Project Veritas.
Or Project Veritas, yeah. That he was somehow involved in the theft or somehow. But the interesting thing is that the New York Times showed no curiosity whatsoever as to what is in that diary. Because yeah, there may well be personal things in there. Fine, you know, no one's interested in her personal life. But chances are there's going to be a lot of very interesting things about her relationship with her father and about her father's activities, but nothing, no mention of any of that in the Times, even though that diary was published by some conservative website, not Project Veritas, but some website. So some of that material is available. So some people know about this.
I mean, but the way they sanitize the story, and it's kind of grotesque, it's kind of sickening, but the way they sanitize a story like that is that Joe might have taken some inappropriate showers with his daughter, and and he's like, oh my goodness, how is that possible? But what about your influence peddling? I mean, right. Is that in there too, or you just want to go to the lurid thing, right. And it's an accusation, and she was in rehab, and so you question, the authenticity. What they do is they gaslight you, okay, right. And then they just say, oh, that's just I don't want to talk about that. Okay?
But mind you, I mean, if he was taking showers, with her, and she wasn't happy about it, and she was already, like I said, a young woman. I mean, there are issues about that.
Okay,
it's sordid. I know sordid, but
he said, she said. I don't think anything like that can be actually resolved. Okay.
No, I agree. But in this case, because these stories had already been circulating about Biden, to say the least, that he has unusual, habits.
Issues. He has issues.
Exactly. So that's an issue, and we don't know. I mean, we don't know to what extent her troubled life, and obviously she's a very troubled person, to what extent that is due to her father, as the case of Hunter. I mean, again, Hunter seems to be a very troubled person.
Well, I would like Tucker to talk a little bit about that. Apparently, they knew each other.
They knew each other pretty well. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. What did Tucker say? He said he had a lot of demons to deal with.
Right, exactly. That's a nice, polite.
Well, Tucker had his own demons. Okay, he kicked the drinking. Okay, he's completely sober now. He's been. I mean, before a lot of people probably don't remember this, but right before the pandemic, Tucker was running an addiction series, okay? Because he was very concerned about, and he actually still talks about fentanyl and all of that. But I mean, he's acutely aware what addiction is, because he's had to have to deal with his own issues as well, and he's very open about it. Okay, he's very open. I mean, when that I think it was a family event, maybe it was a family birthday. They were in a Washington D.C. area restaurant, and some guy, I won't use the language, called his daughter or something. And and everybody was drinking, and Tucker had was drinking water. Okay,
right.
Okay. And Tucker had very strong words. Yeah, because that's his daughter. That's what you do. Okay, that's what a father does.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that is right. But of course, we do know that had it been the other way, had somebody had discovered Donald Trump Jr.'s diary, the New York Times would not hesitate to publish it in its entirety, and with all the
with no verification.
and with all the lubricious details in there. They wouldn't have spared anything. I mean, however lurid and embarrassing confessions there may be in it, it would be there. I mean, there'd be none of this decorum. Oh well, we don't really want to go into personal issues. Yeah, in this case, you don't want to go into personal issues. Look, we know the whole thing about the P tape. No one hesitated. They didn't hesitate.
Stormy Daniels.
Exactly, Stormy Daniels. Yeah.
Did he wear a condom? I mean, what? Remember, I think it was George Stephanopoulos. Yeah. I mean, what kind of creeps? Or Anderson Cooper, I think, did that one. Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Anyway, so we have Spectre in the air, who's going to come back with a response to my comment. It says, I just got back from an 8-kilometer run, pretty good, and also a 2,500-meter swim earlier. Wow. And then it says daughter is taking finals. So well, good for your daughter. Wow, that's a pretty.
Is she taking finals in person or online?
That's a good question. In person or online? That's love to hear from that. But I mean, look, I mean, that's pretty impressive. You know, this the Spectre in the Air was always very generous with us. Is a pretty athletic person, so that's that's very impressive. And then we also have a super chat from Kieran Rooney. I don't see a question there, so I don't know whether it was just a contribution or whether there was you weren't able to fit the question on there. But you know, if you have a question, then please you know, write it down in the live chat, and we'll try and answer. So we have Boyan Perko says, it seems like you believe fathers are somehow relevant in children's lives. Don't you know mothers are the only indispensable parent, and not having a father makes no difference at all? Well, I didn't know that. I mean, that seems like an unusual take. I mean, most people would think that both are relevant. I think most would also say that we get all sorts of social problems as a result of not having fathers in one's life. But it is true that in the early years of childhood, mothers are much closer to their children,
yeah, but that doesn't. But why? One could make the question. And I certainly would. A young mother can dote on her young child, spend lots of time because the mother herself has security because she has a relationship that creates a safe environment. I mean, you know, one can have an opinion on all of this, and some single mothers do a great job. I never would downplay that, but statistically, you know, having a stable nuclear family, your education will be higher, your income will be higher, the amount addiction issues will be lower. You probably won't go to prison. I mean, it's all statistically out there. This is settled. Okay, right. This is settled information.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that it's really sort of a matter of comparing apples with oranges, because people say, well, you know, in olden days, let's say 100 years ago, it was very common for men to die young, you know, working in dangerous jobs, mines, long distance truck drivers, and for women to be therefore alone, bringing up children alone. And yeah, but that was already because you had created a very stable framework, where it was created because you had already married. But that was because that was an expectation, you know, that you know, and there were grandparents and everyone else around that created that stable framework. That's, I think, very different from basically an absence of a complete framework, where you just have a child and then you're supposed to just live off a government handout.
Yeah, because there were no government handouts, so you had to call on your uncle, your aunt, your grandparent, or a series of all the above to take care of a widowed mother with children. I mean, you had, and you see it all through literature, okay? You know, where you ended up in your aunt's house because your mother died in childbirth or something like that.
Right,
okay?
right. Yeah.
I just got a quick message. My lady friend Nastia wants me to say hi to her. Hello, Nastia. Keep studying hard. She's in Yaroslava. I hope she's watching right now, because I told her I would say hello. Okay.
Okay, that's good. So, Spectre in the Air. You know, to answer your question, Peter, is that his daughter is in freshman year biomedical engineering, and so she's taking the test both in person and online. Now required a booster to return in January to school. Well, that's not very nice.
Well, she must be very proud. Okay, that sounds.
Well, yeah, I agree. Biomedical engineering. That sounds extremely impressive. So I guess she's in a good position to understand well, what Fauci was up to and what gain of function research, because that all sounds in that particular field, you know, biomedical engineering. So very impressed by you know, that. Where are we? So again, we get the federal government gives, and this is rail fanning points 2.0. That's a good name, rail fanning points 2.0. The federal government gives Pfizer billions in taxpayer money and makes Americans take its product, won't let Americans sue for harm, shields disclosure of its licensure agreement. Licensure.
Real
Yeah.
racket.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's like, the left, which used to be skeptical about corporate power, seems to think, oh yeah, they're cheerleading for vaccines. And you think, well, hey, these are the big pharma. These are giant corporations who have ripped off, consumers in all sorts of ways over the years. All the dud medication that they peddled. I mean, everyone knows about the opiates, but what about the was it Vioxx, the one that they marketed, and it started killing elderly people. There was elderly people were getting heart attacks as a result of Vioxx. So, but now everyone has great faith in them, and they've been given immunity. And lo and behold, gee, well, aren't they the beneficiaries of all this vaccine hysteria and our booster hysteria? And then we'll get more boosters. I mean, they're making money hand over fist.
Well, just check the stock market indices. You don't have to say any more.
Right.
Okay, George and I don't have to say anything. Look at the evidence. Look at the profit sharing and the stock swaps and all of this other stuff here.
Right.
And most the vast majority of advanced medical technology over the last 30, 40 years, the US taxpayer paid for the research.
Right.
And then they come to a positive fruition, they develop a drug, then they get the rights and then they sell it. There's no downside. There's no downside to these people.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. There's no downside. I mean, once you've been given a waiver, basically from lawsuit, then that's it. And that's why it's so bizarre for the FDA to sign off on this and say, okay, boom, we give our imprimatur to this to the vaccine, but we're also giving you immunity from a lawsuit. You think that doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you're putting the full weight and credibility of the US government behind these vaccines, then why are you giving them immunity from lawsuits?
And Joe Biden, a few months ago, I think it was in the summer, he promised that they would be free, available home testing. Well, there is home testing, and from a friend of mine just messaged me a few days ago, it's $25 a pop. Now, for working people, that's a major expense. What if you have a family of 3? $75. Okay. Yeah. And what if you have to drive to work? You have to decide if you're going to drive to work, take your kids to school, or take a test.
Right. Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly. And
there's so much goodwill out there. And when people say, yeah, I'll do it. If it's free, I'll do it. And then you show up, that's $25 plus tax.
Right. I mean, in places in Europe, I mean, it's even more than $25. And so in Italy, where they've done exactly that, you either take a vaccine, or you have to take a test, once every 2 days. Well, I mean, given how expensive the tests are, you do one of those every 2 days, you're going to be out of pocket very quickly. So it's not like, oh, the government will just provide you with a test, because then I say, okay, fine, you provide me with a test. But no, you have to pay for it out of your own pocket. That's a serious, essentially that is just blackmail or extortion or whatever, because now you're forcing people, hey, I've got to do this.
And it's enforced impoverishment.
Right, exactly. And then no test, no vaccine, you're out of a job. So it's a terrible coercion. And a reckless abandon says the bottom line is that governments don't want their educated sheep workers to get sick and die. They don't mind if retired people stop taking Social Security. They have not funded. Well, I mean, I don't know if that's true, because if that were the case, then the government might think that, hey, why bother with vaccines? Let's kill off the old people. We can cull them. We don't have to pay them Social Security. So in fact, what they're doing is actually the opposite of that. They're actually trying to keep people alive, for as long as possible. So if the government were actually thinking in such a crass way, hey, if the more people we kill off, the smaller our Social Security liability, then they would say, no, I mean, let's not bother with vaccines. You just go right ahead and do what you do.
there's a bit of a caveat there because there's a subliminal involved here. Well, if you're a Trump supporter, don't take it.
That's right.
I wonder if the January 6th people, if their COVID issues have been addressed. One wonders, okay?
Right.
I mean, if you beat someone up in the middle of the night, kick them in the ribs, are you going to say, "Hey, can we give you a COVID test?" Okay, I wonder.
That's a
question.
very good question. Yeah, that's a very good question. Exactly. I mean, what are they doing with them? Are they giving them a vaccine? Are they going to provide them with a vaccine, or are they going to say, "Hey, you better cough up some money for the vaccine"? But I guess even that, the vaccine is being provided for free to everyone. So that's an excellent question. I haven't heard about that. As to what are they doing about the vaccination? I mean, I know they're forcing them to wear masks all the time, but in terms of the vaccine and the test,
it's kind of like we roughed you up last night. We're going to bandage you. Do you want a vaccine while we're in the med ward?
That's exactly. They dump them in the face bleeding, and say, "Oh, okay, but are you ready for your vaccine?" So somebody's saying, WW Storm, it says, "Peter and George, do you think it's a bioweapon?" That's a very good question. I mean, I think that's we know so little about what's gone on in that Wuhan Institute of Virology. We don't even know too much about, that guy in North Carolina who did all that research. I forgot his name. Who also was getting money from Peter Daszak. Is it as innocent, the innocent explanation, which is, oh, well, we're just want to get our vaccines to be as strong as possible against the variants of this pandemic? That's the innocent explanation. The more sinister explanation that this was a bioweapons program. I mean, until we find out more about what happened in that lab. I mean, I think Robert Kennedy's book suggests that it was a bioweapon. I'm not sure, but because I haven't read the book yet. But I mean, I think he suggests that they were experimenting with a bioweapon, and that the virus escaped. But that's a very good question. What was all of this about?
Well, and also to kind of counter it a little bit is that it's really, really dangerous, because if it gets loose, it can kill your own people too. So
right. That's right.
I agree with George. I mean, there's so little transparency, and George and I have said this many times in our podcast, is that the people in the upper reaches of power in the United States and the upper reaches of power in China, they don't want to anser these questions. Right. Okay. There's real collusion there. There's real collusion. And they want to leave it alone. Right. Okay. Because obviously, I mean, we need to know, if not for punitive reasons, at least to not let it happen again. Okay. Right. That's I do it step by step. I mean, if there's a point where like gross culpability, yeah, okay, yeah. But until we get there, we have to understand what happened first.
Right. No, I agree. I think that's the thing. And the problem is we're not getting anywhere. I mean, but it is very interesting as to why did the Obama administration say we're not going to fund this this gain of function research anymore? Evidently, they'd had good advice from scientists who said this is really dangerous, precisely for what you said, that this virus could escape. I mean, these are submicroscopic particles. They can easily escape, and then we know the consequence. And then, so the Obama administration ended this, and then Fauci got around this secretly, surreptitiously, off his own bat. He relaunched it, and I think that's when he started getting involved with the Chinese, because then he could at least get around the stricture of the Obama administration. It's not actually happening on U.S. soil; it's happening somewhere else. So I think it's a really very interesting question. Why did Fauci push for this? Why was he so insistent on going ahead with this?
Well, he was perfectly willing to sign off a chunk of money for the torture of dogs needlessly for something that wasn't even necessary whatsoever. Right. I don't want to. I sound like a late boomer that's really sentimental, but when people pick on dogs, you're picking on the wrong guy, because I do not take it. I just find it so abhorrent. Okay.
Right.
Because in developing a bioweapon, at least there's a point to doing that. Okay, there's developing a virus that you can actually counteract. There's a point in doing that.
Right.
Torturing dogs, there's no point in doing it.
Right, right. No, that's right. It's kind of an amazing thing as these scientists who have been, they've been basically given a blank check to essentially engage in the torture of animals. We're going to do it because we're testing out medicines and so on. But it was always very, very dubious because these are dogs. And dogs aren't humans, so whatever you're going to find out about dogs, it's not, by no means certain that it's going to apply to humans.
That's why they have humanized mice. Okay,
right.
Humanized mice. Right. They're made for these purposes.
Right. Yeah. That's right. Well,
they're made to be experimented on. That's the whole point.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. I mean, the humanized mice thing is, it's particularly done for the purpose of, seeing what they can do, what this virus will be effective will be on humans, and so which makes it all really creepy. I mean,
it's very
humanized mice. Yeah.
It's very creepy. I mean, you don't need a Netflix series. I mean, we already have reality, okay, and that's really grotesque. Okay, apparently, also, just as we're on the topic, there's an island off of the East Coast, like they call it Monkey Island, and they do the same shit there. Okay.
Yeah. All right, Peter. But want to call it a day?
Well, George, you get a good night's sleep because I'm going to see you in a few hours' time tomorrow.
In a few hours' time, yes. So remind everyone who has joined us that we have the crosstalk, and I think it'll be on
all day Monday.
All day Monday. So
And I want to point out before we sign off here, next Saturday is Christmas. Okay. So I hope you'll indulge us and give us the free night off. Okay, you shouldn't be with George and I. Be with your families. Okay,
right. Yeah.
And have some good holiday cheer for us. Okay, because we really like doing this. Everybody knows. There's no doubt we make a big commitment to this, okay? Because we have a commitment to countering all of the nonsense that we hear every single day. And I hope you guys trust us because we trust your questions. We know you understand us, and that's why you keep coming back. And if the tip jar, I just
the tip jar always an important issue. It's a very sore point. Because I've just got a super chat from our good friend Spectre in the air. Thank you so much, Spectre. And he says, arrogance and power drives Dr. Fauci. Unfortunately, animal testing is necessary, not however torture that Dr. Fauci did. So super wrong and evil. I mean, I think I'm sure that's right. I mean, that, there has to be some kind of animal testing. I mean, obviously I'm not an expert in that, but so much of what one reads about these experiments, it just sounds like torture,
Okay, look, George and I, neither one of us are experts in this, obviously, okay? But I mean, it came out in the 1970s and the 80s is the makeup companies, like testing a mascara on cats and dogs, and then they realized, we don't need the cats and dogs to get any improvement. We're not learning anything new. We're just torturing animals, okay? Exactly. Now, it's like for special heart things, stuff like that. And of course, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die on that hill, okay? But in principle, when they knew that it's not going to make we're not going to learn anything new through the pain and suffering of a dog, okay? Then just don't do it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not an absolutist on this because I don't know absolutely everything. I want to be fair.
No, I agree. I mean, I don't know enough about it, and I'm willing to believe that there have to be some kind of testing of new medicines on animals. How useful that is, and given the different constitution of humans and animals. But a lot of times, as you say, I mean, you don't quite see what the point of it is. What you break a dog's leg and then see how the dog moves afterwards, and how quickly the leg recovers. That's the kind of experiment that doesn't seem that there's any medical usefulness. So anyway, Spectre again has given us a very generous Christmas present. thank you so much, Spectre. It's really very nice that you always join us every week, and you're always extremely generous. So very much appreciated, and hope you'll continue to join us. We always love having questions and addressing all the fascinating issues that our fellow gagglers bring up. So with that said, Merry Christmas, everybody. Well, we'll have gaggles.
It doesn't mean George and I are quitting. We're thumbs up, thumbs down tomorrow.
Thumbs up and thumbs down. So exactly.
We go all the way.
Exactly. We're going to be talking to you before Christmas. So anyway, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for joining us. See you all very, very soon. All the best. Bye-bye. Bye, Peter.